have a carrier protein. Binds to this hormone. And takes it to its target site. So here's the target cell. Okay. Once it gets to this target area, it releases this hormone from its grips. And the hormone basically just moves straight into the cell. It will move through the plasma membrane, okay? Because now, if it moves through the plasma membrane, what type of hormones are these? Not water soluble, fat soluble, or lipophilic or non-polar hormones, right? So in this example, we're talking about steroid hormones. Okay, steroid hormones are, let's say, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, aldosterone, any mineralocorticoids, any cortisol, and things like that. Okay? So these hormones move from the blood past the cell membrane into the cytoplasm of that target cell. Once it gets into the cytoplasm, it looks for this nuclear hormone receptor. But it can only bind to the ligand binding domain of this receptor protein. Okay? So it finds this little Pac-Man and it binds to it. Okay. So binding of this hormone to this ligand binding domain activates this DNA binding domain. This whole complex now moves into the nucleus, or we could say it translocates into the nucleus from the cytoplasm. Okay. So it moves into the nucleus, and what it does is it looks for specific binding sites on the DNA itself that will bind the DNA binding domain of this nuclear hormone receptor. And the binding site that is specific for this DNA binding domain is called the hormone response element, which is a couple of segments, a couple of bases on the DNA strand itself. Okay. So here you have one complex, comes in, this one has the hormone bound to it, right? Once the hormone binds to this ligand binding domain, it activates this DNA binding domain, and this whole complex translocates from the cytoplasm into the nucleus, where that DNA binding domain will look for this hormone response element and bind to it. Now, in order for this target gene to be activated, in order for these transcription factors, these hormone response element complex, in order for these guys to activate the transcription of this target gene, you must have two of these complexes binded to or bound to two separate binding sites. Okay? So there's another nuclear hormone receptor that will bind in another or a separate hormone, and they will also translocate into the DNA or into the nucleus and find a second binding site and bind to. So when this happens, they effectively form what's known as a homodimer. Okay? Homodimer because it's the same hormone sitting on or bounded to the same type of nuclear hormone receptor. Okay? So it dimerizes to form a homodimer. Once this homodimer is formed, then it starts to activate this target gene. Okay? So it activates this target gene, and then you have transcription. This is how steroid hormones activate a protein, or activates transcription in order to make a protein, a desired protein of this target cell. So this target cell can carry out its function, whatever function it is that is induced by this hormone in the first place.